Chapter 4. Deeper. Karim. The colony was a body, and Karim was reading the wounds. 20 years of military and private security work had taught him to see spaces tactically, to walk into a room and immediately understand the geometry of threat and response, the sight lines, the choke points, the places where a person could hide or be trapped or make a stand. It was a skill that operated below conscious thought, a constant background process that assessed and catalogued and filed without being asked. Tenebris was the worst space he'd ever read. The team assembled in the canteen after Okafor's briefing. All 10 of them gathered around a cleared table in a room that still smelled of old death despite the sealed suits filtering their air. Okafor shared the unredacted transmission. She read key sections aloud, her voice flat and precise, and watched the team absorb the information that Horizon and the Accord had decided they didn't need. The reactions varied. Achebe showed nothing. Her face behind her visor was the same controlled blank it always was. And Karim had long ago stopped trying to read her internal state from her external presentation. Obi listened with his arms crossed, nodding once at the end, the nod of a man who had suspected something like this and was filing the confirmation into an existing framework. Ruiz's jaw tightened incrementally with each new detail, the anger visible in the muscles of her face, even through the visor. David stopped fidgeting, which was his tell. Sato went pale. Tanaka listened with the focused intensity of a scientist receiving data that confirmed her worst hypothesis. When Okafor read the geological sections, Unipark's analysis of the formations, the fibrous microstructure, the warmth, Tanaka closed her eyes briefly, and Karim saw her lips form a word he couldn't make out. When Okafor read the life cycle details, Tanaka opened her eyes and looked at Marsh with an expression that Karim could read clearly. You knew. Marsh met her gaze. He didn't look away. Whatever had happened between him and Okafor in that room, it had cost him something. The confident ease he'd carried since boarding the Atavist was gone, replaced by something rawer and less polished. He looked like a man who'd been confronted with the logical endpoint of his own priorities and hadn't liked what he'd seen. Volkov took notes. Of course he did. The Accord's representative, documenting everything for a report that would travel the relay network to Earth, where it would be read by people in climate-controlled offices who would deliberate over its contents for weeks before issuing a response that would arrive months too late to matter. Karim didn't resent Volkov for this. The man was doing his job. The fact that his job was functionally useless in this context wasn't his fault. Mission parameters have changed, Okafor said when the briefing was complete. Primary objective remains the same. Assess the threat, document everything, get out alive. Secondary objectives are revised. Horizon's Specimen Recovery Directive is suspended. Our focus is understanding what happened here and gathering the intelligence that the next response team will need. Next response team? Ruiz said. This colony is lost. The organisms are established. Whatever we do here, we're not clearing this facility. We're scouting it. The information we bring back determines what happens next. Whether the Accord sends a military force, whether the planet is interdicted, whether anyone ever comes back here at all. That makes our survival the mission. Everything else is subordinate. She looked around the table. Questions? The lower levels, Karim said. The transmission says the creatures accessed the colony through the lift shaft and the lower tunnel system. If they're still present, that's where they'll be. Going down there is going to them. I know, and we're going anyway, because the data we need is down there. The geological surveys, the cave system, the formations. If we go home with nothing but what's on the upper level, we're handing the next team the same incomplete picture we came in with. Then we go heavy, Karim said. Full combat load. Achebe on point with the squad weapon. Tight formation, no splitting up, no solo excursions. We set rally points on every level so we have fallback positions if contact happens. And we set a hard time limit, 3 hours below the mid-level. If we haven't found what we need by then, we extract regardless. Agreed, 3 hours. Okafor stood. Gear up, we move in 20 minutes. The mid-level was a transitional space, colder than the upper level, darker, the architecture shifting from residential to industrial. Processing facilities lined the main corridor, their equipment idle and dead. Conveyor systems for ore transport, silent and still. Storage bays with doors standing open, their contents untouched. The colony's hydroponics bay, where rows of dead plants stood in their growing trays like a garden after the first frost, the leaves curled and brown, the growth lights dark. Karim moved through the space with his weapon up and his attention divided between the immediate environment and the tactical picture he was assembling in his head. The mid-level was more open than the upper. Higher ceilings, wider corridors, more branching paths, more places for something to hide, more angles of approach that the team couldn't cover simultaneously. The ventilation system was more visible here. Larger ducts, exposed runs along the ceiling where the decorative paneling of the upper level gave way to the functional infrastructure beneath. Several grates were missing or damaged. The same parallel scoring marks were visible inside the ducts. Long, deep scratches that told the story of something large moving through spaces designed for air. They passed the geology lab. Tanaka stopped at the door. "Commander," she said, "this is Park's workspace. The sample analysis was conducted here." Okafor looked at Karim. He assessed. The corridor was clear in both directions. The room was small with a single entrance. The tactical risk was minimal if they maintained security at the door. 2 minutes, Okafor said. "Karim, hold the corridor. Tanaka, Marsh, make it fast." Karim positioned himself at the lab door, weapon oriented down the corridor, while Tanaka and Marsh entered. He could hear them moving inside, the click of sample containers being opened, Tanaka's voice low and technical as she examined the equipment and the notes left behind. "The containment vessels are sealed," Tanaka reported. 6 samples consistent with the transmission's description. Dense, dark, warm. They're still warm after 6 weeks in an unpowered room. Whatever metabolic process these things use, it doesn't require external energy input. "Don't open them," Okafor said from down the corridor. "I wasn't going to. But Commander, these are what Dr. Park described. The seed formations, the earliest stage of the life cycle. They've been sitting here in sealed containers for 6 weeks, and they're still biologically active. They're waiting. For what? For a host, for proximity, for whatever trigger activates the next stage. The transmission said contact or proximity to viable hosts may initiate the parasitic cycle. We're viable hosts, we're proximate. They're sealed in containment vessels, which a geologist sealed with standard lab equipment because that's all she had. These aren't biohazard containment units, they're sample jars." Karim heard the shift in Okafor's breathing, a controlled intake that indicated she was processing a new threat variable and incorporating it into her tactical picture. "Leave them, don't touch them. We move on." Tanaka and Marsh emerged. Tanaka's face behind her visor was tight. The expression of someone who'd just confirmed something she'd been hoping was wrong. Marsh was carrying a portable drive, data from Park's terminal, copied during the 2 minutes they'd had. They continued. The corridor opened onto the staging area, the wide space where mining crews had geared up for their shifts, where equipment was stored and maintained, where the access points to the lower levels began. Karim recognized the layout from the colony's architectural plans, but the plans hadn't included what 6 weeks of vacancy and something else's presence had done to the space. The staging area was damaged. Not destroyed, The structure was intact, the walls and ceiling sound, but marked. The same parallel gouges scored the walls at various heights, some at floor level, some near the ceiling. Equipment racks had been knocked over or pushed aside, the heavy metal frames displaced by something that treated industrial furniture the way a person would treat cardboard. A tool cabinet had been torn open, its contents scattered across the floor in a pattern that suggested not ransacking, but investigation. The objects spread out, examined, discarded. And on the floor leading from the staging area to the lower level access corridor, tracks, not human footprints. Impressions in the dust and mineral residue that covered the floor, wide, deep, spaced at intervals that suggested a stride length significantly greater than a human's. The prints were irregular, not the uniform left-right pattern of bipedal movement, but something more complex, as though the thing that made them didn't always use the same number of limbs on the ground. They led downward. "Those are fresh," Ruiz said from point position. She was crouched at the corridor entrance, her light aimed at the tracks. "Relative to everything else in here, the dust hasn't fully settled back into them. Something came through here recently." "How recently?" Okafor asked. "Days, maybe less. There's no airflow down here to distribute particulates, so settling is slow, but these aren't 6 weeks old." Karim processed this. The creatures were still active, still moving through the colony's infrastructure. The staging area was a transit point. They were passing through on their way between the lower levels and the upper colony. The tracks led down, which meant something had descended recently. The question was whether it was still down there or had returned by a route the team couldn't see. "The lift shaft," Karim said. "Where is it from here?" Devich checked the architectural plan on his datapad. 30 meters south, access hatch at the end of the service corridor. "Show me." They moved as a unit, Ruiz on point, Karim behind her, then Achebe with the squad weapon, then the civilians flanked by Obi and Sato, Devich and Okafor at the rear. The service corridor was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 people abreast, and Karim felt the walls close in with a claustrophobic pressure that he managed by focusing on the tactical geometry. Sightlines, cover positions, fallback routes. The lift shaft access hatch was at the corridor's end, a heavy steel door designed for maintenance access, currently standing open. Beyond it, the shaft. A vertical tunnel 4 meters in diameter, extending upward to the upper level and downward into the dark. The lift car was visible at the bottom, resting on the shaft floor far below, a crumpled mass of metal barely visible in the reach of their lights. The cables hung in severed loops, dangling in the shaft like dead vines. Karim leaned into the shaft and looked down. His light reached maybe 30 meters before the dark swallowed it. The shaft walls were scored, the same claw marks covering every surface, layered over each other in patterns that suggested repeated use. This wasn't a route something had used once. This was a highway. He looked up. The shaft extended to the upper level, where another access hatch, presumably also open, connected to the colony's main infrastructure. The creatures had cut the cables to clear the path and then used the shaft as a vertical transit corridor, moving between levels with the ease of something that didn't need stairs or ladders or functioning elevators. "This is how they got in," Karim said. During the final assault, they came up this shaft while the colony's security was focused on the sealed doors at Junction 4. "A diversion," Okafor said. "A coordinated diversion. One group hits the doors, loud, obvious, draws the response. Another group comes up the shaft, quiet, fast, bypasses the defenses entirely. That's not animal behavior. That's tactical thinking." The team was quiet. The shaft gaped beside them, a throat leading down into the body of the planet. Warm air drifted up from below, carrying that smell. Mineral, organic, sweet. The smell of the deep caves. The smell of whatever lived in them. "We're not using the shaft," Okafor said. "We take the stairs. Standard descent, level by level. Rally point at each landing. Karim, you have tactical command for the descent. Call the movements." "Copy." Karim pulled back from the shaft and assessed the team. 10 people, 7 soldiers, 2 scientists, 1 bureaucrat. Full combat load for the military personnel, sidearms only for the civilians. Achebe's squad automatic weapon was their heaviest asset. Belt-fed, high cyclic rate, capable of sustained fire that could suppress or destroy targets that shrugged off pistol rounds. They had 300 rounds for it. That sounded like a lot. In a sustained engagement against multiple fast-moving targets in confined spaces, it would last minutes. He pushed the arithmetic aside. You worked with what you had. Ruiz, point. Achebe, second position. I want the squad weapon forward in case we meet something head-on. Obi, Sato, flank the civilians. Devich behind me. Commander takes rear with oversight. We descend to the lower level, clear the staging area, and assess the tunnel access points. If we make contact, Achebe engages, everyone else collapses to her position. We do not pursue. We do not chase anything into the dark. We hold, we assess, and we move as a unit. Clear? Nods around the group. Faces behind visors that range from focused to terrified to blank. All of them ready, or as ready as anyone could be, for a descent into a space where something was waiting that they couldn't fully understand and couldn't adequately fight. They moved to the stairwell, a concrete shaft, reinforced with metal grate landings at each level. Their lights cut downward through the grating, illuminating the flights below in fragmented slices. The air grew warmer with each level they descended. The smell intensified. The walls narrowed. At the lower level landing, Karim called a halt. The door to the lower level was closed but not sealed. The electronic lock was dead, and the manual latch yielded when Ruiz tested it. She looked back at Karim. He nodded. She pushed the door open. The lower level was a different world. The upper levels had been human spaces marked by something else's passage. The lower level was something else's space entirely. The corridor beyond the door was structurally intact, but transformed. The walls were covered, not damaged, not scored, but covered. A layer of biological material coated the surfaces, dark and dense and faintly glistening in the helmet lights. It was organic, clearly alive or recently alive, a substance that had been applied or grown across the concrete and steel like moss on a forest floor. It had texture, ridged, layered, with patterns that suggested growth rather than application. Something had cultivated this. Something had made this space its own. The air was warm. 26 degrees, David's readout said. Warmer than the colony had ever maintained, warmer than the planet's subsurface baseline. The biological material was generating heat, or something beneath it was, and the effect was an environment that felt less like a mine and more like the inside of a living thing. "Jesus," David whispered. It was the only word spoken for 15 seconds. The floor was coated too. Walking on it felt wrong. Soft in places, yielding slightly underfoot, the texture somewhere between rubber and flesh. Ruiz moved forward in careful steps, testing each footfall, her weapons sweeping left and right. The corridor branched ahead, left toward the main mine shaft, right toward the equipment storage bays, and the route to the deeper tunnels. Both branches were coated, both were warm. Both extended beyond the reach of their lights into darkness that felt inhabited. "Which way?" Ruiz asked. Karim consulted the map. The route to the deeper tunnels, to Junction 4, Junction 7, and ultimately to Chamber 9, went right. The main mine shaft went left and connected to the active dig sites that the colony had been working when operations were normal. "Right," Okafor said from the rear. "We follow the survey team's route. That's where the answers are." They went right. The corridor narrowed, the biological coating thickening as they descended. In places it had grown outward from the walls, forming ridges and protrusions that they had to navigate around. In one section it had nearly closed the passage, leaving a gap barely wide enough for a person in full gear to squeeze through. The material was warm against Karim's suit as he pushed past it. He tried not to think about what it was or what had produced it. He failed. The sealed doors at Junction 4 were ahead. He could see them in the lights. Industrial mining access doors, heavy steel, the ones that Dietrich Haas had sealed during the colony's final days. The ones the creatures had pounded against as a diversion. The doors were open, not breached, not forced. Open. The locking mechanism had been disengaged from the inside. The manual release lever was in the open position, pulled by someone or something that understood how the mechanism worked. The doors stood wide, the corridor beyond them descending into the tunnel system that led to the deep caves. The biological coating continued past the doors. It extended down the corridor and into the tunnels beyond, a living carpet that had spread from the lower levels into the cave system, or from the cave system into the lower levels. Karim couldn't tell which direction the growth had traveled. It didn't matter. What mattered was that the boundary between human space and creature space no longer existed. The colony and the caves were one continuous environment now, and the creatures had made it that way. "Past these doors, we're in their territory," Karim said. "The architectural plans end. The survey markers are our only navigation. If we lose the markers, we lose our route back." "Understood," Okafor said. "Mark our path. Chem lights at every junction. If we have to run, we follow the lights." David distributed chemical light sticks, green glow, 12-hour duration. They cracked the first one and placed it at the Junction 4 doors, a small point of green in the warm dark. They crossed the threshold. Beyond Junction 4, the tunnels changed. The reinforced corridors of the colony gave way to the semi-worked passages of the mining operation, and then to Raw Cave. The walls were still coated, the biological material thinning as they moved further from the colony proper, but never disappearing entirely, a persistent layer that marked the creature's territory like a scent boundary. The survey markers appeared, small reflective tags, placed by Jonas Wren's team weeks ago, catching the helmet lights and throwing them back in brief, bright flashes. The team followed them deeper, past Junction 7, where David placed another chem light, and into the passages that no human had entered before the survey expedition. The air was thick now, warm and humid, with a sweetness that penetrated even the suit filters as a ghost of the actual smell. Karim's environmental readout showed the temperature climbing, 28 degrees, 29. The passage was descending at a steady grade, pulling them deeper into the planet's crust with each step. Then the markers stopped. The last reflective tag was at a point approximately 400 meters past Junction 7. Beyond it, the passage continued into darkness, but there were no more markers. Karim checked the survey data on his datapad. Jonas Wren's expedition log noted markers placed at 10-meter intervals for the full route to Chamber 9. The remaining markers had been removed, pulled from the rock, deliberately, their mounting holes visible as small divots in the cave wall. Something had taken down the navigation aids that would have guided humans to the chamber. "They don't want us finding it easily," Ruiz said. "Or they're using the same passages and the reflective tags interfere with however they navigate in the dark," Tanaka offered from the middle of the formation. "We're assuming hostility. It could be environmental management." "With respect, Doctor," Karim said, "I'm going to assume hostility." He placed a chem light at the last marker position, and they continued without the tags. navigating by the survey expedition's logged GPS coordinates transmitted through the rock via the team's inertial navigation units. The accuracy degraded with depth. 600 meters of stone between them and the surface played havoc with satellite signals. But the INUS maintained approximate positioning. Approximate was better than blind. The passage opened. The ceiling rose. The walls spread. Karim felt the space before he saw it. The change in air pressure, the shift in acoustics, the sudden sense of volume after hundreds of meters of confinement. Their light swept outward and found the edges of something vast. A gallery. Not Chamber 9, not yet, but a natural cavern large enough that the far wall was beyond the reach of their combined lights. The floor was uneven, studded with rock formations and the biological coating, and the ceiling arched overhead at a height that Karim estimated at 15 to 20 meters. Their footsteps echoed, the sound bouncing and returning with a quality that made the space feel even larger than it was. Karim's instincts fired, every one of them simultaneously, a full spectrum alert that bypassed his tactical training and spoke directly to the animal brain beneath it. The brain that knew, without evidence, without analysis, that this space was not empty. "Hold," he said. His voice was low. The team stopped. Weapons up, light sweeping. The gallery was silent. The air was warm and still. The biological coating on the walls was thicker here, ridged and textured, forming shapes that might have been functional, or might have been decorative, or might have been something human categories couldn't accommodate. The sweet smell was almost overwhelming. Karim scanned the space methodically. Floor, walls, ceiling. The light touched rock and organic matter and shadow. Nothing moved, nothing made a sound, but the space was occupied. He knew it the way he knew gravity. Not because he could see the evidence, but because the evidence was acting on him. A pressure that existed below the threshold of the senses he could name. "Something's here," he said. "I don't see anything," Sato said. His voice was tight. "Neither do I. Something's here." They stood in the gallery, 10 points of light in a vast, dark space, and waited. The silence pressed against them. The warmth enveloped them. The darkness beyond their beams existed as a physical thing, a medium in which something lived and watched and chose, for now, not to reveal itself. A sound, brief, faint at the extreme edge of hearing, not from any specific direction, from everywhere, transmitted through the rock and the air and the biological material on the walls. A low vibration felt in the chest before it registered in the ears. It rose and fell once, a single cycle, and then stopped, breathing. Something in this cavern had just taken a single breath. "We mark this position and move through quickly," Okafor said. Her voice was steady, but Karim could hear the effort beneath it. "Chamber 9 is our objective. We get the data, and we get out." "Commander," Karim said. "Recommendation. We are being observed. Whatever is in this space is aware of us and is choosing not to engage. If we continue deeper, we're moving further from our extraction route and further into an environment where we have no advantage. Every meter we descend reduces our ability to withdraw under fire." "Noted," we continue. Karim didn't argue. Okafor had heard him, considered him, and made the call. That was her job. His job was to keep the team alive while she made it. "Achebe, if anything moves, put it down." "Copy," Achebe said. Her weapon was up, the barrel tracking slowly across the darkness with the mechanical precision of a turret. They crossed the gallery. Their lights carved a corridor of visibility through the dark, 10 meters wide, the world beyond it, unknown. Karim walked with every sense he had stretched to its limit, reading the space for the change, the shift in air, the displacement of sound, The moment when the thing that was watching them decided that watching was no longer enough. It didn't come. They reached the far side of the gallery and entered the passage beyond. Behind them, the vast, dark space closed like a mouth, and the silence that followed was the silence of something patient, something waiting for them to go deeper before it closed the door. There are more stories in this universe, more colonies, more creatures, more people who don't make it home. Like, subscribe and stay in the dark with us.